Elias did me a wonderful favor because he sort of introduced the talk for this evening, because he summarized what I'm going to talk about today. And since we are approaching Christmas, this is a time of the year that it feels like, or it seems like, most people tend or try to be kinder or nicer to one another. I don't know if it's the season, but it might have something to do with the fact that. Oh, okay. He's you got a monitor in case. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. So we have to think that perhaps what's going on at this time of the year is not just the fact that it's the holiday season, but because everybody's thinking about a specific someone who is very important to all of us, someone who's very important to this planet, that my brother talked about this individual so well in the opening prayer. And this is Christ. Since we're all talking about him and everyone seems to be focusing on him, this, as a consequence, elevates the environment, the ambience of the place in which we live, which is earth. It helps us to connect. And as he said in the gospel, that wherever one or more or two or more people are thinking about me or talking about me, there I will be. So at this time of the year, he sure is even closer to the earth. His presence is felt throughout this entire planet. And that's why during this time of the year, we feel so connected and we feel so good and so happy. It's not just because of the gifts, it's because of that one gift, of his presence that is around us. And Spiritism helps us to understand the nature of this great entity that we call Christ, that came here to earth. What is he all about? And science helps to connect what Spiritism teaches us as well. Because if we think about science, what does it teach us? Astronomy in specific. We have a very, very, very infinite universe out there. What we see today in our telescopes, such as Hubble or any of the other ones that are Earth-based, we see images of systems, of planets, of things that have already happened billions of years ago, in the faraway past. Why? Because as we know, light travels at a specific speed. So in order for that light to reach our field of vision, it takes a certain amount of time. And if these objects, these celestial objects, are so far away, it'll take a long time for that light to arrive. So what we are seeing today is, in essence, something that occurred a very long time ago. We have to keep this in mind. What does this tell us? This tells us that things that are occurring today with us on Earth have already occurred for others in other planets. Because if we look at question, let's skip here. If we look at question 55 of the Spirit's book, it asks, are all the globes spinning through space inhabited? And the answer is yes, and contrary to what earthlings believe, they themselves are far, far from being first in intelligence, goodness, and perfection. So we take this into account, and we take the fact that we ourselves are spirits. Christ said that in the Old Testament, it said that we are gods with a lowercase d, and we can do everything that he did and even more so. Excuse me. What does that mean? That means that we can be just as great as he is. But what is the difference between him and us? It's a very, very great distance. And what is that distance? It's the same distance that we've just talked about with regard to the things we see from our telescopes. It is billions and billions and billions of years of distance in terms of progress, improvement, advance, growth, and connection. He has traveled and journeyed all of that which we are still to journey. He has come a long way, and we are still to go a third or a quarter or a sixth or an eighth of that way. This is the great difference. And this is why Spiritism teaches us that he is he is the greatest spirit to incarnate on earth. Because he has already done all of that. And he has accumulated all of this knowledge about the laws of God, about everything that has to do with the laws of our own limited earth. And he came here and incarnated here to start a new step, a new stage in civilization's history. And we find also in Plato's philosophy, in the Platonic philosophy, in his book, The Republic, in Plato's works, in a conversation between Timaeus and Aristotle, we find that there is such a thing called the demiurge, which is that big word that I said looks hard, but it really isn't. And a demiurge, its etymology or its origin literally means a craftsman or an artisan. And in this philosophy from Plato, we find that this craftsman is nothing more than a secondary god, someone who has been given the knowledge to operate the raw matter to make what we have today as the universe, to solidify and put together the things that we have in the universe. So it is a secondary god. And it works with this knowledge that we have from Spiritism and from the gospel. And this is something that came in the 4th century BC, 3rd century BC. So all of these things tie together to teach us exactly what we need to do, what we need to know about the nature of this wonderful Christ, of this Spirit. So the demiurge is nothing more than an entity, a divine entity that was sent to work on this raw matter and create the things that we have today based upon the Platonic philosophy. And they are nothing more than a consequence of something greater. Ergo, there is another origin, there's a source, there's a cause. And that cause in this philosophy is the Father, the origin, the source. So he literally took the matter and formulated what we have here today. Because he is the greatest Spirit that incarnated on earth, and he is responsible for us here on earth. He is the one who helped us since the beginning of this planet, since the beginning of civilization. It is like if we have a professor and we are in a school and we are the students. The professor is going to teach us everything. And this is what Christ is. He is going to teach us everything. He is the older brother who has gone through all of those experiences and who's going to teach us everything we need to know in order to become as well, maybe in the future, the older brother to someone else. Because this is the beauty of the cosmic poetry that God has bestowed upon us. It is this never-ending evolution of being able to help one another and to extend love further and further into the outward reaches of the universe, and outermost reaches of the universe. And we find in the book On the Way to the Light by Chico Xavier the following. He put the chisel of his mercy to the block of unshaped matter, talking about Christ, which the wisdom of the Father had dislocated from the Son for his august and compassion, from the Son for his august and compassionate hands. So we see here another book that came in the 40s, another proof that corroborates all of the other evidence. So here we have Plato, here we have the Gospel, we have the Spirit's book, we have science teaching us these things, and we have this book from the 40s, everything tying together, teaching us the nature of this wonderful being that we call the Christ. And he also told us a little bit about himself. If we look at the gospel and truly study it and reflect it, we find all the answers that we need. All the answers that we need, because we've reached a point where we can study and reflect upon these words and try to disseminate from them what exactly he meant. So he says here, even if to the Jews of the era, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I came from and where I am going. He knows where he came from, and he knows where he's going. But you have no idea where I come from, where I'm going. How can we know? How can we know? Because we are so limited in our earthly convention. There's no way for us to understand a being that is much greater than us. And at that time specifically, how would we know where we came from? How would we know any of this? There is just no way. To this day, some of us still don't know this. You judge by human standards. Everything we do is limited by the conventions of earth. Everything, all the judgments, all the laws, like Humberto said, everything we do, everything we pass in this earth is limited to our current dimension, to our existence here. I pass judgment on no one. Here is this greatest Spirit incarnate on earth saying that he passes judgment on no one. So again, who are we to pass judgment on anyone? It is not our duty to do so. The first person whom we need to pass judgment on is our own selves. But if I do judge, my decisions are true. Why are his decisions true? Because his decisions are based on the divine laws that he learned from billions of years of evolution that he's already traveled and traversed. So everything he decides upon, all of his judgments, everything is true because it is based on what? On the Father, on the one cosmic truth, on all the laws that are out there from nature, which is none other than the Creator. because I am not alone. So he is saying here, his decisions are true because he's not alone. Why? Because he has him by his side, the Father. He worked from that very first particle, as we know, the very tiny atom, all the way in this evolution to the rational being, to where he is at this moment. And we are just now starting to get kind of rational in this evolution. He has traversed an entire journey of beginning from creation, from the love of the Father, being sent out into the ether, into the universe, to begin his incessant evolution, his immortal journey. And he has now reconnected entirely with the Father from the word religion, the actual word, the origin of the word, which is religare, which means to reconnect with the Father. Because that is our entire purpose. It is to reconnect with the Father. That's our journey. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is true. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me, sent here by him to teach us, much like any other dean of a university will send a specific professor to teach a course somewhere to help those students learn what they need to learn in order to move forward in their grades, to pass, to progress. It's the same thing. There is no difference. Everything that happens on earth is a tiny rudimentary copy of the things that happen in the universe. Why? Because we are doing the things that we have already seen. We do the things that we have already experienced. We just begin to mold them in a better way as we progress. They become finer. They become more in accordance with divinity as we become better, as we evolve. Excuse me. Once more, Jesus said to them, I am going away, and you will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come. I am going away. He knew that his existence here was temporary. He's teaching us here that he's going away. We know that we go away as well. But then he says, you will look for me. What does this mean? This means that we have this inner urge, even though we don't understand and we may not realize it immediately, to seek out something that will fulfill our desires, to sate our needs. But we just can't quite pinpoint what that is. Here he is pointing it out for us. We are after this benevolence from the Christ, his love. We are after him, his essence, because we are going to end up being just like him, another co-creator in this wonderful universe. And you will die in your sin. Why? What does this mean? This means that we will try and try and try, but we will try the wrong way. We will deviate from the right path. We won't do what is right. We will try certain things, but we're going to fail. We're going to fail and we're going to give up because we're not doing it correctly like he taught us, which is to accept the burdens of life peacefully and in harmony, to accept the burden of the cross, our own inner cross, so that the yoke is easy and the burden is light. That's what he taught us. Where I go, you cannot come. Of course not. Can we as freshmen in a university go to where a PhD goes after class is over? Obviously not. So if this cosmic PhD is going to leave this environment, he's obviously going to go somewhere where we, the very, very lowest of the students, the remedial students, the pre-algebra students in college, I was one, will not get there, will not be able to penetrate there. Why? Because we haven't reached that level of understanding yet. Those billions of years of the light years of the things that we see from space today, we have still a long way to go to get there. You are from below, I am from above. Again, same thing. You are of this world, I am not of this world. He isn't from here. He just said it. It's easy as that. The answer is in here. He gave us the answers. We don't see it because we don't want to. Religion, dogmatic religions don't see it because it doesn't serve a purpose. It doesn't serve their purpose, what they want. But the truth is that Christ is not from this earth. And perhaps neither are we. If we are infinite beings, and he is as well, that means that we might have come from somewhere else. But we've stopped at this station of life to continue on the project of love. I have much to say in judgment of you, but he who sent me is trustworthy, and what I have heard from him I tell the world. So Jesus is what? God called, Jesus is the speakerphone. That's it. He's a speakerphone. He doesn't say anything. He's just the instrument. His actions, his words, yes, he said stuff, but his words, everything, is nothing more than that phone call that came from the Father. This is why everything he said created a division in history and awoke humanity to something different and something new, leaving behind the dogmatic, antiquated ideals of the people of that era that served their purpose then. It served their purpose. It helped people to understand certain things. But at that point, humanity needed to progress further. So he came and literally and figuratively drew the line on the sand for us to cross. And he invites us to this day to cross that line, but it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to cross it today or tomorrow or the next day. But the truth is, we will have to cross it eventually. If not through love, through suffering, if not through suffering, by force. When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am He, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The speakerphone analogy. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. Of course he hasn't left him alone. God never leaves us alone. How can the Father? If a father on earth who loves his child cannot leave his child alone, if a cosmic Father who has the most perfect love, would he be able to leave any of his children alone? Obviously not. It's a matter of simply analyzing things on earth and comparing them to divinity. It's very crude to analyze it this way, but it helps us to understand what this is all about. And it makes it simple for us to understand what it is all about. So he also said, and this is all in chapter 8 of John, of the Gospel of John. You'll find all of this in chapter 8. At this they exclaimed, "Now we know that you are demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are?" So Jesus replied, "If I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. Here is the greatest spirit to come on earth, humbling himself because the one who he has to glorify is the Father. The biggest lesson, perhaps, is the fact that he was born in the manger, the most humble of positions in that era that anyone could be born in. A stable, more or less, where animals live. That's where he was born. Far, far, far more humble or humbler than conditions today in the poorest of nations. There was no electricity, none of the modern technology that we have today. Can you imagine a PhD professor who is accustomed to Wi-Fi, all the modern technology? All of a sudden he has to go to Africa or any other continent, doesn't have to be Africa, any continent, in any place, a village, where people have no technology, no access to internet, nothing, no running water, and teach his material there? How benevolent is that professor? Letting go of all of those things to come to this village, to these humble people, and teach them the things they need to learn. And of course, he has to teach them how? In simple words. Because if he uses the big words that he has already learned through his travels, those villagers are not going to understand him. And amazingly so, the villagers of that day, which are we of this day, still don't understand the simple words he uttered back then. And that's a shame. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. What does that mean? Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. Clearly, Abraham, having discarnated, as the Spirit, saw what was going to happen on earth, the plan that was laid out for earth, and who was going to be incarnated as a consequence on earth later on. You are not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. There's the answer. He was already him when Abraham was here, before Abraham was here, before the earth was here. The Christ is that evolved, is this great brother of humanity. He was already the Christ before earth was conceived. On our estimates here on earth, 4.5 billion years ago, which probably is wrong because science has a lot to learn yet. Can you imagine a spirit that was already like him 4.5 billion years ago? Who were we 4.5 billion years ago? Monkeys, figuratively speaking, intelligence-wise? Beating on each other with rocks and bones? Probably. And he was already what he is today. Now imagine what he is today, billions of years later. How much further ahead he's already traversed and how many more things he has learned, and we are still behind. It's an amazing thing to think about. But he's saying here that I was already there. He's telling us about the immortality of life. We are spirits. We are not this body. We dive into the ocean of earth with a suit so we can breathe here and live here. And we have all worn different suits of different sizes, of different colors. But the diver, we, the divers, are all the same essence, same father, same gene, same family. At this, they picked up stones, and that's not important. Again, this is on John chapter 8. And in the book, O Evangelho de Jesus em Espírito e Verdade, por Herculano Pires, or the Gospel of Jesus in Spirit and Truth, we see the following. A poet is a prophet. Jesus was considered a prophet. Why is a poet a prophet? I'll tell you why. Well, I'll let Herculano tell you why. Poetry brings with it a stimulus to the spirit, to the soul. It opens the perspectives of beauty, not only in a musical sense, in words, in its meaning, or in the way in which each poem is expressed, but also the internal message that it brings to the understanding of the beauty of life, things, beings, of everything that passes through it, as if they were true fluidic colorations carried by a breeze. As such, modern poetry, the poetry that emerged in the New World, brought with it a new message that man did not understand. What was the poetry that Jesus brought, that was written and left to us for posterity? The gospel. He is the biggest poet. He is the celestial poet, title of today's talk. Why? Why is the gospel a poetry? I'll tell you why. Because of what he said here, what he just said. It opens the perspectives of beauty for all of us. We see things in a different way. And in the way in which each poem is expressed, but also the internal message that it brings to the understanding of the beauty of life. That's what the gospel did. And that's why Jesus is the celestial poet. Jesus did call God the Father, but placed him in a universal paternity. What I just said. We're all divers in the same ocean, wearing different suits, but the diver is the same. Thanks to this affirmation of the issue, he effectively brought down all dissension created among men on the basis of racism, of the racial diversity that exists, and that existed at that time due to the lack of human understanding concerning the common origin of all creatures and of the spiritual nature of men. So, more than 2,000 years ago, he already killed any argument for racism, for separation and segregation, all the things that cause all the conflicts on earth, the bloodlines, the battles, the wars for conquest, for empire. He already gave us the answer, but we're too busy sleeping in this wonderful nap called the earthly life, instead of waking up to the immortal life and understanding that we are here temporarily, and what we gain here is temporary. What we do here is perishable. So it's going to go away. It's not imperishable. Our nature is imperishable, so that's what we need to be working on. Not on the nature of earth, which is perishable. All those the Father gives me will come to me. And whoever comes to me I will never drive away. We all went to him. The Father sent us to him. Take care of my children. I will leave you the responsible chaperone for this homecoming event on the earth, where all of these students will be incarnated and begin a new process of evolution along with this planet. You watch over them. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. Jesus did nothing without the precise authority and guidance of the Father. When do we screw up in life? When we do nothing and nothing, but only the things that come from the precise authority of ourselves. That's when we screw up in life. And why did Jesus not screw up? Because he did nothing but the will of him who sent me, or who sent him. That's why he didn't screw up. Well, he couldn't anyway. It's like a PhD professor again. Do you think he's going to screw up on his subject after decades of studying that very closely, that specific subject? No. And here we have a PhD cosmic professor, older brother, who has studied the subject for billions and billions, if not trillions or quadrillions or quintillions of years. We don't know. There's no way to measure time outside of Earth. We have no idea. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of all of those he has given me. So none of us will be orphans. None of us. None of us, excuse me. But raise them up at the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. Let me read to you exactly what the explanation about this is, because Herculano's words are better than mine by far. So just give me a moment here. And bear with me because I'm translating the text. It's in Portuguese. So I'm reading it in English, but it's not in English. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So God determines a certain privilege for those who believe. Okay, so this is not it. Sorry. So Jesus placed the issue in a way that was very clear concerning this particular passage, saying that all of those that were given to him by the Father, all of those that will go to him by force, because the Father gave him those individuals, those people, all of those that follow him, the Christ, all of those that accept him, and all of those that understand him will be saved in the resurrection of the last day. Okay. It is not the last day of the world. It is the last day of each one of us. Because each one of us will perish. We will die. As the Apostle Paul taught us in the first epistle to the Corinthians. And he says it here. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. Here he is doing his own exegesis or deeper study and clarification of this passage of the Christ. Again, another apostle telling us exactly what we need to learn about our own nature, telling us that we are immortal beings, telling us that this life is temporary. The proof is in the pudding. It's right there. There's no way to mistake it. That's reincarnation. That's what Christ wanted to teach us, that we are immortal. We only suffer because we think we are mortal. We aren't. If we understand that we have so many other opportunities lying ahead in the future, we become a lot more patient with the current existence that we have. The first man was of the dust of the earth. The second man is of heaven. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. How can a perishable thing inherit what is imperishable? It doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It does not fit. You cannot you cannot put the ocean inside a glass of water. It does not work. Nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Of course it doesn't. Finite cannot inherit infinite. It makes no sense. That's as logical as it gets. It's perfectly explained. And in this resurrection of the last day for each one of us, in this resurrection, the one who understood the teachings of Jesus is naturally going to be saved because he has eternal life. In other words, he has the understanding that he is eternal. He does not consider himself dead, and he will live eternally. The resurrection, therefore, is for everyone, and eternal life is also for everyone, in accordance with the teachings that were given by Jesus here. But it is the moment in which those who have not accepted this, the ones who are still buried in the old convictions, the antiquated preconceptions, that they need to understand Jesus and the teachings of the gospel. And Jesus tried to awaken them here. That's what he sought, to awaken them. And to this day, he seeks to awaken us who are still in a very deep slumber about the reality of our existence. And then we find on the book, again on the way to the light, this wonderful saying that needs no explanation. Jesus, only Jesus, has stood firm on the dolorous pathway of the races, and his aim is to tear down all barriers to universal fraternity. He is the light of the beginning, and the destiny of the world rests in his compassionate hands. His magnanimous soul is the fount of life for all of earth's humanity. His message of love and the gospel is the eternal word of resurrection, justice, fraternity, and mercy. All things human have passed away. All things human shall change, but he is the light of all life on earth and is untouched by time and destruction. And of course, humbleness is the biggest lesson as well. If he, this great professor, this PhD professor, came down to the village of Earth to teach us who have no technology, not even a pencil to write with, what it is we need to do, if he took the time to come here and teach us all of these things, this image is the summary of this. And this small phrase is found in the book Pensamento e Vida, or Thought and Life by Chico Xavier, that says, to belittle oneself in order to help without losing one's height is to ensure the improvement of everyone, accentuating one's own sublimation. To belittle oneself in order to help. He came down somehow and fit inside this small diving suit, this great essence, to be able to help us in the most limited sense possible of the material that we have here on earth. He came here and helped us without losing one's height, but he never lost his height. Not the physical height, but his spiritual greatness, his spiritual height. He maintained the same harmony, the same level frequency his entire existence on earth during his teachings here on earth, when he began the work of love here on earth. He maintained the same austere, strong, passionate, and loving behavior, which he taught us as an example. He didn't just teach us the words, he put the words into action, which is the simplest way to teach anyone. When we teach little kids, we teach them by doing because they don't understand words yet. That's what he did. He taught us little kids by doing because we didn't understand his words yet, and we still don't. It's to ensure the improvement of everyone because he wants us all to become better. He wants us all to improve. He wants us all to join him in the feast that awaits us in the kingdom of heaven. Because the kingdom of heaven is not something outward or exterior to us. It is within us. Because once we transform all of these things that we have within us, the potential that we have within us, we become a walking kingdom of heaven. This is what he's teaching us. This is what he wants us to do. Accentuating one's own sublimation. He humbled himself, and as by doing so, by fulfilling his mission, by not erring, by not deviating, he showed how sublime he is. This is the beauty of the Christ, this celestial poet. And to close today's talk, I want to share with you a poem about this wonderful brother, the Christ. Oh, it's right here. Pay attention to the words. Mighty hands have sculpted our home, given us a school in which to learn. His touch is comparable to none, and it is his love which we yearn. His light descended on earth when we were ready to receive the divine gift that would give birth to a new era where we would weave a new world of heavenly worth. He is the cosmic representative of the Father that he told us about. Yet we remain inattentive and filled with doubt. However, if we have the ears to hear and the hearts to feel, we shall no longer fear, because he is the one who will heal our stubborn ways, restoring our trust, helping us to raise the inner kingdom from the dust without any further delays. We are with him, and he is within. His message of love is eternal because of its origin, not material, but ethereal. He is the Son of the Father, who was sent to us through Mary, the Mother, the living example that will take us farther, leading us all together to that warm embrace that fills us with immortal grace. His words of love are a melody, an ode to the eternal sonnet, channeled from divinity. Jesus is our celestial poet. Thank you so much for your attention today. May God bless each and every